There are some stories that begin with a single question, and then there are stories where every answer leads to 10 more questions. This is one of those stories, because what we're looking at here isn't just a rumor, it isn't just internet speculation. It's a timeline that doesn't quite add up, a gap that no one has fully explained, and a series of moments that, when placed side by side, start to feel less like coincidence and more like something carefully avoided. The disappearance no one can explain. Let's start with the part that everything revolves around. 8 months. That's how long Erica says she removed herself from the world. Not metaphorically, literally. She claims that during that time, she locked herself in her room, cut off nearly all contact, and lived in isolation. No social life, no public appearances, no normal routine. Just her thoughts, and a very limited circle of people. According to her, the only person she would see outside of her family was her pastor's wife. Now pause for a second. 8 months isn't a short break. It's not a vacation. It's not a gap year decision. It's an entire chapter of someone's life. And when someone disappears for that long, especially at a time when they're supposed to be actively building their future, it raises a very simple question. Why? The context that changes everything. At the time this happened, Erica wasn't disconnected from responsibilities. She was a college student, which makes the situation even more unusual, because you don't just step away from an entire academic year without consequences. Classes, attendance, exams, all of that doesn't just pause. So either something serious happened, or there's more to the story than what's been publicly shared. The pageant exit and what came after. Right before this disappearance, Erica had been involved in the pageant world, a space built on visibility, presentation, and constant public engagement. Then suddenly, she walks away, not gradually, completely. In her own words, she wanted to detach from that world, the ego, the image, the expectations. And on the surface, that sounds like a personal transformation, a shift in priorities, a decision to reset. But here's the part that people can't ignore. Most people who step away from something don't vanish entirely. They transition. They don't disappear without a trace for nearly a year. The specificity of time. 8 months. Not around a year. Not several months. 8. That level of specificity matters because it aligns almost perfectly with something very particular. And this is where the internet did what it always does best. It started connecting dots. The theory that changed everything. People began pointing out something that once noticed becomes hard to ignore. 8 months is almost the exact length of a full-term pregnancy. Now, let's be clear. This is not proof. It's not confirmation. It's a theory. But it's a theory that suddenly makes that missing time feel less random. And once that possibility entered the conversation, everything else started getting re-examined, revisiting the past with new eyes. Old videos, old appearances, moments that once seemed completely normal were now being looked at differently. And then, one particular clip started gaining attention. A rally, a public event. Nothing unusual at first glance. Until you look closer. The child in the frame. In that footage, Erica is seen standing with a man believed to be someone she was involved with at the time. But standing with them is a young girl, blonde, around 7 years old. Now, children appear at public events all the time. That alone means nothing. But context changes everything. Because when you take that child's estimated age and go back 7 years, you land right in the middle of 2008, the same year as that unexplained disappearance, the moment that raised eyebrows. It wasn't just the presence of the child that caught attention, it was the behavior. The way the child stood close to Erica, held on to her, showed a level of comfort that felt familiar, natural, like there was a bond there. Now again, this doesn't prove anything. Children can be affectionate. They can feel safe around many people. But when paired with everything else, it becomes just enough to make people pause. Pattern or coincidence. This is where the story becomes less about facts and more about interpretation. Because humans are pattern-seeking by nature, we look for connections. We try to make sense of incomplete information. Sometimes we're right. Sometimes we're not. But once a pattern feels convincing, it's very hard to unsee it. The ultrasound detail that complicated things. As people continued digging, another detail surfaced. An ultrasound image. At first glance, nothing unusual.
But then someone noticed the name attached to it. It wasn't her married name. It was her maiden name. Now again, that alone isn't suspicious. Medical records reflect names at the time they're created. But in the context of everything else, it raised another question. When exactly was this taken? And more importantly, does it align with the publicly known timeline? Privacy versus public sharing. Then comes one of the most confusing aspects of the entire situation. Erica has stated that she chose to remain private during her pregnancies. She stayed out of the public eye, avoided appearances, kept that part of her life hidden. And that's completely valid. But here's where it becomes difficult to understand. If privacy was the goal, why share certain details publicly? Why show pregnancy-related moments, medical glimpses, personal updates, and then disappear completely at the same time? It creates a contradiction that people struggle to reconcile. The psychological layer. At this point, the story isn't just about events. It's about perception. Because when information feels incomplete, people fill in the gaps. And the less clarity there is, the more speculation grows. Not necessarily because people want drama, but because unanswered questions demand answers. Charlie, the missing piece in the puzzle. Now we come to another critical part of this story. Charlie, a public figure known for being calculated, strategic, and highly aware, which leads to a natural question. If there were undisclosed parts of Erica's past, would he not know? And if he did know, what does that change? Possible scenarios. There are only a few logical possibilities. He didn't know? He knew and accepted it? There's nothing unusual at all, and the speculation is incorrect. But without clear answers, each possibility remains open. And that uncertainty is what keeps the conversation alive. The relationship timeline. The relationship itself has also been examined closely. From first meeting, to marriage, to public image. Everything appears structured, fast-moving, highly visible. Now, that's not unusual for public figures, but when combined with everything else, it adds another layer of curiosity. The wedding optics. The wedding itself was high profile, well-produced, strategically timed. To some observers, it felt more than just personal. It felt intentional. Again, that doesn't prove anything, but it contributes to the overall perception that this isn't a typical story. The bigger picture. At this point, we need to step back, because it's easy to get lost in details. But the real issue isn't any single moment. It's the combination of all of them. A missing 8-month period, a timeline that raises questions, visual moments that feel open to interpretation, inconsistencies in public versus private behavior. Individually, they mean very little. Together, they create a narrative that people can't ignore. Reality versus interpretation. And this is where things get important, because not every mystery has a hidden truth behind it. Sometimes, a gap is just a gap. A coincidence is just a coincidence. And a story feels incomplete simply because not everything is meant to be public. But still, even with that being said, the questions remain. And until those questions are clearly answered, people will continue to speculate, to analyze, to connect dots. Final closing. Strong, thought-provoking. So what actually happened in 2008? Was it truly a personal retreat? A private struggle? A chapter that simply wasn't meant to be shared? Or is there something more? Something that hasn't been fully explained? Right now, there are no definitive answers. Only pieces, fragments, moments that may or may not connect. But one thing is certain. When a story has gaps this noticeable, people will always try to fill them. And sometimes, the story people create becomes just as powerful as the truth itself.